Hey there, you're listening to the Girls Talking Life podcast, and I'm your host, Johanna. If you're like me, you love time with friends. I always leave feeling encouraged, inspired to try something different, or I've learned something new. So why not continue to grow even when we can't be with our girlfriends? We're not made to do life on our own. So in each episode of this show, I'll bring you a girl and her story to give you refreshing ideas to stir your soul. Let's walk this road together. Are you ready to talk life? Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you chose to spend some time here. It is officially summer, and I'm going to take a break from releasing some new episodes during the month of July, but Girls Talking Life will be re-releasing some top shows from 2019. So if you're new here, chances are you haven't heard them yet, and if you've been listening for a while, these stories are ones you may want to hear again. I may even pop in with some life updates from the featured guests. Today, I'm excited to bring you my youngest guest to date. I am talking with Emma Sievers on the show. Emma is a 22-year-old blogger, speaker, and school psychology graduate student from Wisconsin. Her goal is to tell the stories that God is putting on her heart so that other people can find hope and encouragement from them. Emma has been through quite a lot in her 22 years, but she has chosen to look at all the good that has come from her setbacks. She has been through not one but two nearly fatal car accidents, the second one causing an injury that left Emma suffering from anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Emma talks about how she had a strong relationship with God, but how she was made to feel like her mental illness was a result of not having enough faith or because she wasn't doing something right. She tells us it took a while for her to stop feeling shame about her situation, but she has so many good messages to get across to anyone who is struggling with illness or any setbacks in their life. She wants you to know that your illness is not a sin and it is okay to get help. Here is my conversation with Emma. Hey there, Emma. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Absolutely. It's so good to be here.
I'm really excited to talk to you, and I just want to know a little bit more about you. Who are you? What do you do?
Well, first of all, my name's Emma Sievers. I'm 22 years old, and I live in Wisconsin. I am currently a school psychology graduate student, but with everything going on, I'm doing that online. And I guess the biggest part of my identity would be that I love Jesus with all my heart. I really felt it kind of a tug on my heart lately to share my story with others in hopes that even just one or two people would be like, oh, I can identify with that. So that's a more recent thing I've been doing, but I've done a little bit of public speaking in the past, just with talks about mental illness and how addiction has kind of played into my family life. And I've spoken at my Fellowship of Christian Athletes chapter at my high school just about some of my experiences and how God has touched my life. But I'm mainly a school psychology graduate student right now. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Okay, well, I think that you might be the youngest person that I've had on the show.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, and you have a lot to talk about in your 22 years. There's been kind of a lot that's happened to you.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask where your faith journey started out so we can kind of go from there.
Yeah. When you think about faith, and a lot of people talk as if there's this one huge moment that God stepped into their life, and it wasn't really like that for me because I grew up in a household that practiced Christianity. I lived in a home where we went to a Lutheran church, and I was just kind of your typical kid who would color in the pews and not really listen.
I can totally relate to that.
Yeah, kind of went in one year, out the other. Went to Sunday school. I understood what religion was, but I didn't really have a relationship with God. And then that kind of all changed when I was in 5th grade. When I was in 5th grade, I was in a really bad car accident where, honestly, if you looked at the car, it's a wonder that I got out of there. I got T-boned. I was sitting in the passenger seat, and I got T-boned on my side. So I got really badly injured. I had over 150 stitches in my face. I had to go get plastic surgery so that I could see out of one of my eyes. So I got really badly hurt, and that was as I was going into middle school, which middle school is a very superficial time, and a lot of middle school and how you're looked at is based on your appearance, unfortunately.
Right.
And so really, I guess when I started noticing God was when, despite everything that happened, I didn't really care, I guess. It sounds weird, but I went into middle school and I was like, you know what, this is my strength mark. It's cool that I made it through this, and who cares if my face looks a little bit different than the other kids, that's okay. And I guess it's not like in that moment when that happened, I was like, oh, God was there. But like looking back, the only really explanation for how I was so at peace with everything was that God had his hand on me and had a purpose in my life.
Did you experience any negativity in middle school because of that?
Oh yeah. So I got bullied pretty bad in middle school, and not just for how I looked. I had some comments from kids, obviously, all the time.
Yeah.
Just kids being kids and not being the nicest. But I was also, unfortunately, I was late to school a lot. So my mom was battling addiction at the time, and she still battles addiction and mental illness. So I was always late to school just because a lot of times I was figuring out how to get to school in the first place. And so kids kind of picked on me for that. Yeah, I mean, middle school just wasn't the best experience overall, but I can look back and I'm like, God definitely had his hand on me during that time, because there was so much peace despite everything going on, despite the fact that my mom was struggling, the fact that I was going through some stuff and dealing with some bullying and dealing with the typical mean girl type of stuff going on. So
yeah, and middle school is tough for someone not going through those things. It's just such a tumultuous time. So wow, right. I'm so glad that you could feel some peace.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I don't think without those experiences, I would want to work with middle schoolers like I do now. Like, I really want to work with middle schoolers in the future, because I know it's such a tough time, and I really felt like I could have used a mentor during that time in the school setting. I had a lot of really good mentors outside of school. Like, my dad is my rock, and I had so many good like second moms, even though my mom wasn't always super present. But in the school setting, I really felt like I could have used someone who had my back, and so that's kind of why I went into the field I'm going into. So again, I really feel like God shapes so many different pieces of your life for good, and that's one of them. I mean, I love middle schoolers, even though it's challenging. I think there's so much good in their hearts, but so much of that good is kind of manipulated by all the complications that happen in middle school. So
yes, I have a middle schooler.
Yes, it's a tricky time.
Totally get that.
Absolutely. So I guess, like, yeah, that's how my faith began, just kind of looking back on all the peace that he brought me during those challenging times. And it's easy to say now, I call it the rear view mirror effect, where you like look back and you're like, oh, look at all those times. But I mean, it is so evident that he kind of has his hand on those different pieces of your life, and you're like, you know what, that happened definitely the way it should, even though I didn't recognize it at the time. So that was when I guess my relationship with God started to develop, just because I was like, wow, someone's taking care of me up there for sure. And I had enough of that faith background where I knew God was real, but then our relationship kind of developed through those experiences. And then I went to high school, and I was involved in Fellowship of Christian Athletes, which is a little group that meets before school every Wednesday, and the high schoolers come and talk to you, usually upperclassmen, and share their kind of testimonies about how God played into their life. And so then I dug into scripture more, because they were citing all these different Bible passages, and then I really started to understand the Bible a little bit more. Then I went to college, and I went to a Christian college, and again, faith is such a big part of my college experience. Like, we had a chapel and we prayed in class. So it's just been kind of this evolving process. And now my relationship with God is so strong just because of all those experiences compiled together. And I think that's important for people to know, because I mean, for some people it is this big wow aha moment where God reveals himself in their life and they all of a sudden are like fully devoted to him. But for me, it was this like kind of growing process where all of a sudden he'd touch my life here, or he'd be I could feel him in that part of my life, and all this, now I just want to like tell everybody about how amazing he is. So, but actually almost 2 years ago now, I was in another really bad car accident, which again sounds crazy, but my friend and I were on the highway and a guy crossed over the median and hit us head on, and we were going 70 miles per hour and he was going probably the same speed, and it was bad. And I recently posted about this on Instagram.
I saw the picture of the car.
Yeah, so the guy that hit us ended up passing away, and they think he had a medical episode. And so my friend, one of my best friends in the entire world, Lizzie, she got really badly injured. She basically broke all of her limbs. Not like, it's hard to explain. She had so many injuries, and I had a really bad brain injury and ended up struggling with anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, all these things afterwards. Wow. And it was tough because it's a stigmatized topic in the church community, unfortunately. Not for everyone, but there's just like certain people talk about it and relate anxiety and depression to be like being distant from God. And so I kind of I didn't struggle with my relationship with God because we already had such a firm foundation, and I knew that he wasn't mad at me for this. But then when I was like searching for answers in the Christian community about why I was experiencing anxiety or some of those things, there's so much about it means you're distant from God, or you're not doing this, or you're not reading your Bible.
Yeah, have some faith, right?
Right. And because I was doing all those things, I was just so confused, and I'm like, but God, we have this firm foundation, like our relationship is so good, like why am I hearing all these things, like what am I doing wrong? And so I guess that's when I started to kind of want to talk more about my faith, because I didn't want anybody else feeling how I felt, like lost in there. And I had a firm foundation with my relationship with God, but what about somebody else who doesn't necessarily have that firm relationship because they haven't been like practicing their whole life? I don't want them to be scared away from this amazing relationship just because of like some stigma or things like that. So, I mean, that's a long story. That's kind of just like my evolved relationship.
Well, so talk to me about, you were in college, you were smooth sailing and everything is good. You have a great relationship with the Lord.
Yep.
And it is about 10 years, I think, from your first accident. Is that right?
Yep.
And then this happens again, like nearly fatal. Yep. You have all these injuries. Were you upset a little? Were you questioning things a little bit there?
Oh, yeah. And that's like the main thing I want to get across to anybody listening is I am so far from perfect. Like, I get angry. I get frustrated. I mean, I make mistakes just like any other human. So I was for sure upset. I didn't really understand, like, why would this happen again? Like, I felt like I'd already kind of shown my faithfulness and been through enough to kind of, I don't know, it was super frustrating. And I guess the hardest part for me was after it happened, because of what the car looked like, so many people came up to me and were like, you must have this purpose, and there's a reason you're still here. And it put so much like pressure on me to do this like big miraculous thing, because I feel not that that's what people were expecting, but it just, it put a lot of pressure on me to have this like, aha, I'm gonna change the world because I survived this. So I just like felt some guilt. I felt confused. I kept searching for answers as to why God would have something like this happen again. It was really hard. And unlike the past two experiences where I kind of trusted God in the moment, and then afterwards I could reflect back on those experiences, like my mom's addiction and my first car accident, I could look back and be like, yeah, I mean, I can see how God had his hand on me in those experiences and how he touched my life in this experience. But in this one, because I had already kind of see what he had done with those other experiences, I was like, so what's the good that's going to come out of this? I want to know now. Like, I want to know what you're doing now, because I don't understand it right now. And I feel like I've been through enough, and I feel like this life has put me through enough so far. And so I was constantly like searching for answers and questioning, and that is not the right thing to do. That, looking back, I'm like, I should have just trusted, because it caused me a lot more confusion and anger than needed be. But yeah, no, totally felt angry, totally was questioning the purpose behind it. But
That's very human to do,
yes,
right? I mean,
absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
any one of us would have had those thoughts and feelings.
For sure. So no, totally was angry. It wasn't like I was like, God, I know you're blessing this car accident. Again, I was like, dude, what you doing? What you
Right.
doing to me?
Hey there, I'm going to interrupt just for a minute to let you know about Pure Haven. Pure Haven is the maker of fresh, safe, personal, and home care products. I've been using these products for years now, and I love that I can use them on myself and my kids without worrying about the ingredients. And they have some great summer specials. They have limited release Pina Colada products available through June 30th. Shampoo, hair mask, and moisturizing hand soap. Yum! Also, with a $95 purchase this month, you will get a free charcoal detox shampoo, charcoal powder, argan oil, and coconut oil. You use this weekly to lift away product residue and excess oil buildup from your hair. To check out more of their products or to make a purchase, go to purehaven.com/girlstalkinglife. Now back to my conversation. What did your recovery look like?
Yeah, so I was on bed rest for so it happened July of 2018, and I was basically on bed rest the rest of the summer. I was in the hospital for a couple days, but I was a terrible patient because I'm very stubborn, so I kept trying to yank the breathing tubes off of me, and I tried to so I wanted to get the heck out of there. And so I was in the hospital for a couple days, came home, was on bed rest for probably till the end of August, with some breaks. Like, my brother and I would take, we called them our old lady walks, because no offense to anybody listening, but I would just we'd walk around my court, and then by the end of the walk I would just be so tired and so sick, and so mostly bed rest with a couple walks in between there. I would wake up every morning and feel like my head was in a cloud. I woke up every morning in a terrible mood, which is so not like me, and people were really confused because it's very different than my normal persona. And I had a broken foot, which I actually didn't even realize, because they were so worried about my brain injury that they didn't realize I broke my foot. So all of a sudden I looked down and my foot was super swollen, and we went and got it examined, and it turned out my foot was broken too, but they didn't even really take care of that because they were so worried about my brain. So yeah, it was just a lot of sitting around, a lot of not doing much. A lot of people came and visited me, and I didn't even remember because my memory was so bad. But yeah, it was an interesting process. But then the interesting thing is, so I was a college tennis player, and the doctors basically told me, you're not going to be going back to playing tennis. You're going to be lucky if you get to go back to your senior year of college, because we really think you need to take this time to rest your brain. And I, being my stubborn self, was like, yeah, we'll see about that. And so I actually ended up going and playing my senior season of tennis with a broken foot.
Oh my goodness.
And and my brain was not super recovered. For some reason, when I was in the middle of a tennis match, I just didn't really feel any pain. I was in a boot, would take the boot off before I went and played a match, and then would put the boot back on after the match. It was kind of nuts.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, it was a really weird experience. But again, I just kind of trusted and was like, we'll see how this goes. And I didn't really feel a ton of pain during the matches. And yeah, that's kind of how my senior season of tennis went. And that's how you can tell God has his hand on your life, because you're despite all these things that happen, that was meant to be, despite everything else going on. So
how do you recover from a brain injury? How do you even monitor that you're making progress? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a lot different than other injuries for sure, because not that it's subjective, but it's just a lot of you kind of interpreting what's going on in your life. And it's really difficult because, for instance, I thought I was doing great as far as the memory component, and then my friends would be like, you've had me repeat the same story like 3 times. So it's hard to even recognize if you're getting better. I went to a lot of different doctor's appointments. I had to go do a lot of testing for anxiety and depression because that was the main thing that they were concerned with, just because my mood. I mean, like I said, like I would wake up and I was just like so sad, and that's just not my normal persona. So I was just so confused about like why I couldn't feel better and why like going on walks and talking to my friends and doing those types of things weren't making me feel better. So I took all these different, like, there's like the Beck depression inventory and there's anxiety scales, and then they would have me do a lot of different like memory tests. And so I went into the local hospital, and every like month or two I would just go in and do some more testing so that they could see that I was making progress. And I did, like, slowly but surely I made progress, besides like my mood stuff and some of the depression and anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. That was the only thing that didn't really get better, but my memory got a lot better. Okay. So that's kind of the main way they track progress and do those things.
Okay. And then what happens with the anxiety and depression? Does that lift? Are you still dealing with that?
Yeah. So that's really kind of what my focus is talking about now, is because for me, I felt so guilty because I thought I was doing something wrong. I thought I wasn't doing the right things to make me happy. I thought I wasn't like I said before, I had a really good relationship with God. I mean, I was reading my Bible and praying and doing all the things I normally did to sustain our relationship. But because some of the things I heard, like the stigmatized topics of like, you're far away from God if you're experiencing these things. And so I was, I had a hard time because I was just, my faith had always been my constant. And then people were telling me that I was doing that wrong. So there's a lot of different feelings when it came to my mental illness and struggling with some of those things. And those things, I will be totally honest, those things have gotten so much better, but it's only because I leaned on some of the earthly supports here, like counseling. And I'll be completely blunt, I do take medication, and some of those things, they're, again, stigmatized topic, but those are the tools that I really feel like God put on this earth to help me feel better. And now I'm feeling so much better. And that's why I'm able to do things like this and help people. It's because I had those supports from the counselors. And then I leaned on my faith like I always did. And that's, of course, always made me feel better. But I needed to let go of some of the guilt of having to lean on some of those earthly supports and realize that that was going to make me altogether better and make me stronger in my faith and able to share my story with others if I leaned on some of those earthly supports. So yeah, I mean, it's way better now. It was a slow process. I mean, it's been almost 2 years, and in the last couple of months, it's gotten better, but only because I finally caved and was like, I need help. Like, I need someone to help me.
You told me that your dream job would be to speak and advocate for mental health.
Yes.
What would you say to someone who is suffering maybe in your early stages of anxiety and depression right now?
Yeah. My biggest advice is, first of all, don't feel like it's a sin. It's not a sin. God is not mad at you for what you're dealing with. It's the same as an injury. It's the same as me breaking my foot in the accident. Me breaking my foot was the exact same as my brain injury. And I want to say, no matter if you've experienced trauma and that's why you're dealing with some mental illness, whether you have a brain injury or whether it's just something that came up, because that's totally real too. I just would say don't be afraid to get help, because that's something I was so scared to do for so long. And I really think it prevented me from enjoying life and being able to help other people, because I was so scared. Like, what are people going to think if I go on medication, or what are they going to think if I go see a counselor? Like, it's been a year and a half since this accident happened. What are people going to think? And really just, first of all, let go of that and help yourself, first of all, and continue to lean on your Heavenly Father, because He's so there for you. Like, there's so many Bible passages that relate to anxiety, and none of it, or like struggling with mental illness, and none of it says it's a sin. It just says God wants to be there to help you, and He doesn't want you worrying about tomorrow, and He doesn't want you to be anxious, because He wants to be there for you. So I guess, just don't be afraid to get help, and don't be ashamed because it's as real as breaking your leg.
You have a blog, and I don't think that we even mentioned that in the beginning, but you have a blog called The Editorial. And I wanted to read something that you wrote in a post about setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
You say, but looking back, something good has come out of every single situation that God has put me in. I hope and I pray you can trust that the setbacks God has put in your life are there for good. They may test your faith, and it may be difficult to find the silver lining or change in yourself right away, but it will be there. God's plan may not be the same as what you designed in your head, but I can assure you that his plan for you is good. That's awesome. First of all, thank you for that, Emma. And what point was it for you? When were you able to look back and be like, God, this was for good?
At every stage in my life, I can look back and see how he was doing things for good. And I'm not going to promise there's going to be good that comes out of every situation, but not every situation is going to be able to be explained. For instance, death. Death is not something I think that is easy to understand. So I just want to preface what I'm about to say by explaining that, because for some of the listeners, they probably have lost someone dear to them, and I don't want to make them feel like what happened is okay, because it's hard and what they're dealing with is hard. So preface with that, I don't exactly know the good that comes out of death. I think that's something that we'll understand later on once we're all up in heaven together. But the good that has come out of every single situation is, I guess, my ability to share what I've experienced with others so that they can find hope in their own life. So for me, dealing with a mother who's an addict, I know in the future, if I work with some of my students who also have parents who struggle with addiction, not that I'm going to tell them my whole life story, but I'm going to be able to relate to them somehow. When it comes to my brain injury, I know how it feels, I guess, to struggle in school. I know how it feels to have mental illness, which is not something that I had ever experienced before. So as a psychologist, I can empathize. Again, I don't think it's healthy to be like, well, here's my whole life story and this is how I can relate to you. But I can truly, to some degree, understand what people are struggling with. And I think that's so important. And that's why we're relational people and why we need to tell our stories, because it normalizes things for other people and it makes them feel like they're not alone. And that is just so important, because in our society, especially right now, there's a lot of isolation, and in general, I feel like there's a lot of isolation. So just being able to share stories and relate to one another is so important. So with everything I've gone through, the overarching theme is that I can empathize so much with other people, and it's made my heart bigger for other people because I know that everybody has their own story. So yeah, that would be the overarching good that's come out of every single situation. Okay.
And you are, did you say 2 years out from that?
From, my most recent car accident, that was July of 2018. Yep.
Okay. So, I mean, that's not that long ago.
Yeah, it feels like it was just yesterday, and it feels like it was 10 years ago all at the same time. It's kind of weird.
At what point then were you able to kind of move out of that fog that you were in and be like, okay, I see the good. I get it.
Yeah, I would say it's hard to pinpoint an exact time because it's an evolving process. Because I still had panic attacks, and I still have some things like that where I still kind of wonder why did this happen? But I guess it's kind of a cheesy story, actually. So my boyfriend and I met because of my car accident. He was on the tennis team with me, but he actually tutored me in biology because I could not get through bio with my concussion.
Aw, well, that's a sweet story.
Yeah, and so he's the best human. He is so kind and loves Jesus so much. And I guess in love, I was so in love with well, I'm still so in love with him, but once I saw the good that kind of came out of me struggling with school and meeting him, maybe that's when some of the fog, I guess, went away, because I'm like, well, here's some good that came out of this situation. And I'm not promising that you're gonna meet the love of your life if you go get in a car accident, but that was one of the blessings that I think God put in my life. for
Yeah, that
sure.
sounds like a great turning point.
Yep. Yep.
So what would you say to someone listening who isn't quite there yet? Whatever their negative situation is, whatever their fog looks like, and they haven't gotten to the bright point yet, what would you say to them?
It's coming. I promise it's coming. One of my favorite Bible verses comes from the book of John, and it talks about how Jesus comes so that we're not stuck in darkness. And that pertains so much to my life because he promises that we're not going to be stuck in darkness. He doesn't promise that darkness isn't going to come, because it is going to come, unfortunately, because we live in a sinful world. But he promises that we're not going to abide in darkness. And so that means eventually we're going to get out of it and we're going to be in the light, and he's going to show all the good that can come out of some of these situations. So I guess that would be my advice, is just be patient, because it will come. It might be longer than you want it to, because not unfortunately, but it's God's timing and we can't really control when things happen.
Not at all.
Not at all. But yeah, just, I promise that you're not going to be stuck in it forever. And it's hard when you're in the moment. I mean, if someone would have told me that in August of 2018, well, you're not going to be stuck in this forever, I'd be like, yeah, okay, well.
Sure feels like it, right?
Yeah, it sure feels like it. But no, I promise you're not going to be stuck there.
That's great. Thank you, Emma.
You're welcome.
My initial instinct is to tell you, like, I'm so sorry that all this has happened, but you have actually said that you don't think you would rewrite your life if you could.
No, I wouldn't.
You think that your faith might not be as strong if this stuff hadn't happened to you. So instead, I will say, thank you for sharing it. I'm so glad that you are where you are now, and that you want to use this story to help other people and to encourage people, no matter where they are, that they can continue on.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's well put. Thank you so much.
I want to shift gears a little bit and ask you for your favorite 5. What are 5 things that you're wearing or doing or maybe eating right now that you love?
Oh my gosh, I love this part of the podcast. Oh, I was like, maybe someday she'll ask me this question.
Today is your day.
Yes, okay. I would say number 1, I love Brooks running shoes. They are like running on a cloud.
Ooh.
I'm a huge runner. Or walker. My family and I either go on a run or a walk every day. And it's kind of part of my self-care, and how I take care of my mental health is just by listening to podcasts and going on runs. So Brooks running shoes.
Okay, I've never tried those, but that sounds great.
I guess number 2, which I've been indulging in too much, is Culver's ice cream. I'm from Wisconsin. Or Culver's custard, sorry. So I'm from Wisconsin, and I love, my guilty pleasure is for sure ice cream and custard. So with everything going on, support local businesses, I've been going and getting a lot of custard. 3rd would be probably Dunkin' Donuts coffee. That's another one of my guilty pleasures. I love their large iced coffees with caramel and lots of sugar and yummy stuff. So
sounds good.
Yep, I'm a huge coffee drinker. Something that I've recently really started to love is Elevated Faith clothing. They are a company that donates a lot of their proceeds to missions funding and helping local, or not local, but worldwide organizations that fund missions. And so they create really comfy clothes. I bought a long sleeve and a sweatshirt, and they have like different Bible verses, or they say like woman of God, or God is greater than the highs and the lows. They have all these like cute sayings, but all of it relates to faith. So that's something that I've been wearing a lot, especially in quarantine, because all of their clothes are super soft.
I love when I find companies like that are have something that I really want, but also have a great thing that they're doing behind the scenes of their business. Great.
Absolutely. And then I guess number 5, you guys are probably going to think I'm like a candy sugar lover, but I love sour gummy worms. I'm just, again, sorry that these are all food related, but
hey, that's okay.
Quarantine life, I'm just giving you the recent updates. Quarantine life has been a lot of food and running and wearing comfy clothes. So those are my 5 things.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Emma. I
But
completely can relate to the eating and also the getting outside. So,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. Well, I have so enjoyed talking with you. Again, thank you for sharing your story and your favorites. I hope that this just continues to evolve for you and you get to speak and share more and more.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.
I hope you loved hearing from Emma. She is a beautiful girl with a heart for God, and I love that she's sharing her story with the hopes of helping other people. Find Emma on Instagram at EmmaSiever22 and on our website, theemmatorial.com. Everything we talked about, including how to connect with Emma, can be found on the show notes for today's episode. Also, be sure to find me over on Instagram at Girls Talking Life, where I'll be asking you some questions via the Girls Talking Life conversation card so we can keep the conversation going. If you have a friend who needs to hear this encouragement, please share the show with them this week. And friends, don't let the conversation stop when the show is over. Share your stories and start your own conversations with the girls in your life. Thanks for tuning in.